Hello everyone, welcome to our channel that takes you on an exciting journey through real-life mysteries and stories solved in the most intriguing ways. If you're a fan of captivating narratives and tales that make you rethink the world around you, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to support us by liking and subscribing so you won't miss any of our new content. We're thrilled to share this special story with you today. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, the chilling true story behind the infamous serial killer. Scene 1, The Early Years of Richard Ramirez. Richard Ramirez was born on February 29, 1960, in El Paso, Texas, into a tumultuous family environment. His father, Julian Ramirez, was a strict and abusive man, often subjecting his children to physical punishment. Richard's mother, Mercedes, was a devoted but overwhelmed woman who struggled to keep the family intact. From a young age, Richard witnessed violence and turmoil, and these experiences would shape his dark future. As a child, Richard was quiet and withdrawn, but he began showing signs of aggression as he grew older. His behavior became increasingly erratic, and by the age of 12, he had already begun to experiment with drugs and alcohol. However, the pivotal moment in Richard's life came when he was 13 years old, when he was exposed to violent imagery that would deeply impact his psyche. His cousin, Mike, a Vietnam War veteran, showed him photographs of the brutal murders he had committed during the war. This exposure to violence sparked a fascination in Richard, and it seemed to plant the seeds for his future crimes. Richard's family moved to California when he was in his late teens, and it was in Los Angeles that he began his descent into crime. He quickly became involved in a world of drugs, stealing, and petty crime. His behavior became more disturbing, and he began to exhibit an unhealthy obsession with Satanism. Richard adopted the nickname, the Night Stalker, a moniker that would soon become synonymous with fear across Southern California. Scene 2, The First Murders. In the mid-1980s, Richard Ramirez's criminal activities escalated. On April 10, 1984, he committed his first known murder, a brutal attack on a woman named Jenny Vincao, who lived in her home in the Silver Lake neighborhood of Los Angeles. Richard broke into her apartment, brutally stabbed her to death, and then ransacked her home for valuables. He left behind his distinctive signature, a pentagram drawn on the wall with blood. This pentagram would become a key symbol in his later crimes. Over the following months, Richard continued to break into homes, targeting both men and women. He would often enter through unlocked windows or doors and, once inside, would overpower his victims, torturing them, raping them, and eventually killing them. His attacks were shockingly violent and left survivors deeply traumatized. His crimes were becoming more audacious, and with each new victim, his reputation as a ruthless killer grew. Scene 3, The Ramping Up of Terror. By the summer of 1985, Richard's killing spree had reached a fever pitch. On the night of March 17, 1985, Richard attacked a couple, Maria and her fiancé, in their home in Rosemead, California. He shot both of them at point-blank range, killing the fiancé and leaving Maria severely wounded. Just days later, he struck again in Monterey Park, California, where he attacked another couple, killing the woman and seriously injuring the man. Richard's MO remained consistent. He would break into homes, often in the middle of the night, and attack his victims without warning. He would sometimes bind his victims before sexually assaulting them, and he frequently left disturbing messages at the crime scenes, such as "Satan lives" and "devil worship." These acts, combined with his erratic behavior and bizarre rituals, made him even more terrifying. The media quickly caught on to the wave of violent crimes sweeping through Southern California, and soon, Richard Ramirez's name was being whispered in the streets. He was becoming a household name, not just for his gruesome killings, but for his disturbing obsession with Satanism, which fueled his terrifying persona. Scene 4, the first publicized drawing of the Night Stalker. As the number of attacks increased, the police began to connect the dots. The similarities in the crime suggested that they were dealing with a serial killer. However, despite the mounting evidence, Richard Ramirez remained elusive. The authorities released a sketch of the suspect based on the accounts of survivors, but for months, the killer continued his reign of terror. It wasn't until the summer of 1985 that Richard's crimes began to take a toll on the community. People were too afraid to sleep, worried that they might be the next target. The police were under increasing pressure to catch the Night Stalker, but there were no solid leads. As the murders continued, the atmosphere in Los Angeles became more tense, and residents lived in fear of the killer's next move. Scene 5, the capture of Richard Ramirez. On August 30, 1985, after more than a year of terror, Richard Ramirez made a critical mistake. While driving in a stolen car, he was spotted by a group of citizens in East Los Angeles. The residents recognized him from the police sketches, and they immediately began to chase him. Richard attempted to flee on foot, but the residents caught up with him and detained him until the police arrived. The capture of Richard Ramirez ended the nightmare that had plagued Southern California for more than a year. The police took him into custody, and after a lengthy interrogation, Richard finally confessed to the murders, though his motives remained unclear. He claimed that his actions were driven by a need to kill, a desire to satisfy his cravings for violence and power. His obsession with Satanism and the occult played a significant role in his psyche, but Richard also expressed no remorse for his crimes. Scene 6, the trial and conviction. Richard Ramirez's trial began in 1988, and it was a spectacle that attracted worldwide attention. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence against him, including the testimony of survivors, physical evidence found at crime scenes, and his own confession. Throughout the trial, Richard remained emotionless, staring at the jury with a cold and detached demeanor. His presence in the courtroom was unsettling, and many people were shocked by his lack of remorse. In 1989, Richard Ramirez was convicted of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. He was sentenced to death, and the jury's verdict sent shockwaves through the country. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Richard continued to maintain his innocence, though his own confessions contradicted this claim. He was placed on death row at San Quentin State Prison, where he would remain for the next several decades. Scene 7, Legacy of the Night Stalker. Richard Ramirez's crimes left a permanent mark on the public consciousness. The fear he instilled in Southern California was palpable, and his name became synonymous with evil. He became a symbol of the dark side of human nature, a reminder of the capacity for cruelty that exists within some individuals. For many, his trial and conviction brought some semblance of justice, but the impact of his crimes remained. Ramirez spent over 20 years on death row before his death in 2013. His health deteriorated over the years, and he was eventually diagnosed with cancer. He died on June 7, 2013, while still incarcerated. His death did not provide the closure that many had hoped for. The legacy of Richard Ramirez lives on, not just as the Night Stalker, but as a reminder of the darkness that can exist within humanity. Despite the passing years and the justice served in the court of law, the crime of Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, remains one of the most horrific and mysterious murder cases in American history. His story raises profound questions about the nature of human evil and how factors like a troubled childhood and extreme beliefs can lead to the destruction of lives and the crushing of innocence. Even with his arrest and conviction, the aftermath of his crimes continues to haunt the victims' families and the community, who lived in fear of the terror he spread in every corner. In conclusion, the story of the Night Stalker serves as a tragic reminder that some crimes are never forgotten and that the impact they leave on lives cannot be easily erased. It is hard to find explanations for such monstrous phenomena, but what we do know is that justice has prevailed, even though questions will persist about the factors that shape this human monster, and how society can understand and analyze the darkest aspects of humanity.